we're looking at the existence of God right now, and we're not diving into the Trinity or any real theological doctrine at this point, but we're looking at the doctrine of the existence of God. How do we know that God exists? Last week we opened up and we seen what Richard Dawkins, the atheist, quote unquote, had to say about God. And when it was all said and done, even though he slammed the God of the Old Testament and he tried to promote atheism, he still brought out the fact that he believed that it's a possibility that something created everything. So he leaned more towards intelligent design than he did, but he hid behind the cloak of atheism, where there is no God. We looked at the cosmological argument, which is the argument for cause and effect. Basically, if something has been created, then something had to cause it to be created. Kind of like the law of every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If a ball is rolling, normally something had to push it. There was a cause, therefore, an effect, so therefore there had to be a cause or originator. Today we're going to be looking at the teleological argument. The teleological argument. And when we look at this argument, it actually goes right hand in hand with the cosmological argument, which is the argument of law of cause and effect. If there is something, something had to create it. And all this is right there in your notes. I realize I'm using some larger terms, but basically what we're looking at is arguments for the existence of God. And that's really what it breaks down into. And when we look at the teleological argument, we find, like I said, once again, it goes right hand in hand with the cosmological argument that we just talked about. If someone would please read Psalm 19:1, Psalm 19:1, someone else, Psalm 8:3, Psalm 8:3, and one other person, Psalm 94 and verse 9. Psalm 94:9. The heavens declare the glory of God. And I can't remember the rest off the top of my head, brother. And the firmament showeth his handiwork. If someone else would please read Psalm 8, verse 3. Psalm 8. You got it? I'm sorry to interrupt, Sister Karen.
When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained.
And someone else reads Psalm 94:9.
He that planteth the ear shall he not hear, he that formed the eye shall he not see.
All these things had to do with design, God's handiwork, the firmaments, how they were created. And when you look at the teleological argument, that's exactly what it is. The argument that God exists because of design. When we look at the universe and the solar system and the order and the way that everything is specified to the minute detail and arranged in such a way, itself shows that something had to create all this. And it didn't just happen by chance. I mean, and we'll probably see part of this again. I can't remember where I was watching with the teenagers, but there was somebody that was talking about all the variables that comes into play when it comes to a habitable planet for life. It has to have oxygen. It has to have a liquid water. It has to be placed just in the habitable zone of the arms of a spiral galaxy. It couldn't be anywhere else, but it had to be in that one position of that whole galaxy where it would be good for life to exist. It also had to have a certain, I think it was a G2 star, which is basically our sun, to keep the planet from going back and forth. It had to keep it stable on its axis. It had to have a satellite or a moon to keep the rotation even. When you look into all the factors that must come into play, these things can't just happen by chance. In fact, I think it was some crazy number, like it had a possibility of 1 to the 1 billion of possibility of happening. I might have had it wrong, but there were quite a few zeros behind it. And when you look at all this, nature itself and the design of nature cries out that something created it. And when we look at the world around us, it reveals that it didn't just happen by chance, or that this person didn't just, if you want to say, take a wad of spit and throw it out in the universe and all this dust collected and this is what we have. But rather it displays that the Creator had to be intelligent, it had to know balance, but it also had to throw out their purpose. It had to institute purpose into everything. I thought it was me. I can't remember where. I get so much information coming in from everywhere. I can't remember where I put it. I think it might have been Louis Giglio. I don't agree with everything he stands for, but he's had a lot of good things to say in those. And I'm going to forget the name of the series. But basically, he said, if I remember correctly, it was him, that the way that our galaxy is positioned, in the spiral galaxy that is sideways, and our position in it is almost as if God wanted us to look out and say, hey, look at everything I created. And he threw this out there just for pizzazz, and this out there for an eye display, saying, you know what, you might think you're so important, but look at all this stuff that I created just for you to see. Your mind cannot fathom what all is out there. You talk about nebulas, spiral galaxies, clusters. It's just amazing. And just when you think that they discover all the planets, I know even when I was growing up there were 9 original planets that went out to Pluto. But now they've discovered planets beyond that yet. I mean, our universe is so vast that how can you not claim to be that it just happened? There had to be some originator. There had to be a designer somewhere in the middle of all of it. And when you look at all the intricacies of the human body, how can you but stand back and say, this just happened, is a result of evolution? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, they still haven't figured out what the appendix is good for. It's just like hanging there. But when you look at God's creation, nothing's there just to be there. Everything has a purpose. And when we look at nature and look at the design of everything, I mean, even the leaves, when it realizes that rain is about to come, curls up on its end, waiting to receive it. Everything claims and points to an ultimate designer. In fact, when you look at evolution, it's such a preposterous theory that when they say you can take one small component and then it grows from one cell into a whole multi-cell organism, but yet you can take your wash apart system jam, put it in a Ziploc bag, shake it for 1,000,000 years, and you know what you're going to have at the end of 1,000,000 years? You're going to have a mess. You're going to have all the parts for a functional instrument. You can even have a functional brand new battery in there, but at the end of the 1,000,000 years, it doesn't matter how much shaking is going on, the wash is not going to come together and be a functional wash, even though you have all the pieces. But yet they claim with evolution that all it took was one cell and it evolved. Everything about design indicates that there was an ultimate designer and an originator with intelligence that knew that everything needed balance and that everything was to have a purpose. Nothing happened by chance. In fact, for the atheist, that's what makes Christianity so great. And the fact that we have a God, and He's a real living God. A documentary, No Intelligence Allowed by Ben Stein, was saying, he interviewed Richard Dawkins earlier in that video that I showed last week. That you guys can see the whole thing of, not like that was important, but anyhow, when they were talking and he asked him, how did you, Richard, get past your Christian background? Because he was raised in church. It wasn't until he went away to college that he actually began questioning his faith. And every time he said something, he used the word hope. Well, I had to get past the hope that there was an afterlife. So then evolution became a little bit easier to accept. And he used that word hope. And then he said once he got past the hope that there was a God, then he could accept evolution right out. as Christians, we have a hope. And it's not placed in nothing, but it is placed in someone. And when we look at the world around us, it just points that there is hope for the believer because there's something greater than, or someone greater than us. And he has intelligence, he has purpose, and he has balance. But greater than that, he has all wisdom and power. And when we look at creation, it demonstrates that. I mean, how can you work out an ecosystem like this? Or even greater yet, let's go back to the very beginning before the fall. Everything was perfect. In fact, before Noah, it didn't rain. So yet, the water had to be pure. But yet, even in the middle of sin, God institutes a purification system for that rainwater. It comes down, it soaks into the earth, it evaporates, the clouds cleanse it, purifies it, it comes right back down to us. There is an ultimate designer in the middle of harmony, but also in the middle of chaos. And when you look at the design of everything, it points to an ultimate creator. In fact, the interesting thing is, if you combine the cosmological argument, which is the argument for cause and effect, and the argument for the teleological argument, which is the argument for design, you have the argument that argues for not only an ultimate creator, but an ultimate architect as well. Just the way that everything fits together. Any thoughts, any questions before we move on? If not, we'll move on to the next argument, which is the anthropological argument. And this argument comes simply, as we've already talked a little about in the argument of design, but from the makeup of man. Because our human bodies are so complex, how can there be anything but an ultimate creator? And when we look at the existence of man, to whom do we owe our existence? Someone or something greater than man had to create us. I mean, when you look at the human body, and here in either probably next week or the following week, we'll look at a documentary called The Case for the Creator, and we'll see how the cell of a body, just one cell, is so complex. And it's not just the cell itself, but the flagellum. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've used that word or thought about it. The flagellum. But it's designed in such a way that you have a rotating tail, but the thing that makes it rotate has so many parts, it's almost as if it's its own little motor within the human body. And all we're talking about is one little cell. It is so complex that it could not have just come into existence. Someone or something had to create it. But when we look at man, apart from design, we find that with the human mind, that we are capable of reasoning. We are capable of making intelligent decisions. Do we always make intelligent decisions? No. Does that mean we don't have the capacity to do it? No. We're just stupid sometimes. And we make stupid mistakes. But when we look at the human brain and the capacity to ration out things, man is so complex. And the fact that he is capable of making intelligent choices of short-term suffering for long-term goals, it's not just the ability to choose, do I want to eat an apple or a pear right now, but we can plan things out, whether it's for the next 5 minutes, for the next hour, for the next day, for the next week. Sister Tina sitting there at the bank, we can sit down and figure out and look at things and say, well, if this happens, what is going to be the long-term cause of it? What is going to be the result of it maybe 5 years from now? The fact that we can sit down and figure out long-term goals indicates that there is an ultimate designer. We are not created without a purpose. We are not created with the ability just to think for the here and now and that's it. But we are designed in such a way that we can ration out things and figure out how is this going to affect me in eternity. Our minds can sit down and actually think about these things. Not only is it the fact that we have the ability to ration out and think and take into consideration the consequences of choices, but we have a moral nature. When we look at the universe, does an animal know the difference between right and wrong off the bat? No, if we train them, they do. If your dog makes a mess on the floor, takes a piece of food off the table, and you look at him the right way, he knows what that look means, and you'll maybe bow his head and take his tail between his legs and run off somewhere. But that's because he's been trained. But the human being, you and I, are different. We have something inside of us called a conscience that allows us to know the difference between right and wrong. It is not the fact that we were trained that way. And regardless of what society teaches, it was not conditioning of the church that gives you say, okay, this is bad and this is right. But rather, even without that, the human conscience knows the difference between right and wrong. If you go into a tribe that has never been reached, you know one thing you'll find? They'll be doing sacrifices. And probably more than likely human sacrifices. And they'll be doing it because they know that there has to be shedding of blood. And why are they performing sacrifices? Because they know that they've angered the gods. Well, if there's no sense of right and wrong in mankind, how do they know that they've angered the gods and done wrong? Is that also part of their quote-unquote religious conditioning? Maybe their quote-unquote religious elders told them what's right and wrong and this is what you have to do to satisfy it, and it's passed down for years and years? No. They all had to begin somewhere. And the fact that you can go into any tribe, whether known or lost, and if you discover them, you would come upon the knowledge of them knowing that they know what is right and knowing what is wrong. I was listening to a sermon. Actually, I think it might have been Revival hymn. But there was a preacher on there, and he was talking about how he went to Africa for the heathen because they were lost. And when he got down there, he was so mad at God because he found out that when he got down there, that they knew that there was a God and that they were living in sin, but they were happy to be living in their sin. And he said he was so angry and frustrated with God. I came down here to win the heathen for you. I came down there to show them to you that because they never knew you. And here I get down there, they know you exist, and they know that they're doing wrong, and they are living in their sin, and they are loving it. And he said that God responded back something like this. Do I not deserve the reward of my suffering? I didn't send you down there for them. I sent you down there for me. But when you look at it, even the most remote tribe that is hidden and lost to all of society knows that the difference between right and wrong. And that itself indicates the fact that it's not self-imposed, but rather is placed within us. And that everyone is born within a conscience. And if we know that the difference between right and wrong, then we know that we're breaking a law. And if we know that we're breaking a law, then there must be a supreme lawgiver. Someone or something greater than man. The other point is, man is a personal being. We have self-consciousness and realize that we are not self-caused. We know we did not produce our own souls, therefore we must have been caused by someone with sufficient power to produce our souls. When we look at that, who's ever seen a soul before? If we got down to it, we can see a mind, but we can't see a soul. And when we get to it, we know that we are personal and that someone created us In fact, someone created us with the ability to choose for ourselves. Therefore, if we have a soul and free will, we are personal beings that were created for a purpose, and that we have the ability to choose. Therefore, someone greater than man must have placed that within inside each one of us as well. Not only that, is man is also an emotional being. Only a being of goodness, power, love, wisdom, and holiness could have brought about these things in a man. When we look at this argument, it assures the existence of a personal being who rules in righteousness and who is the proper object of supreme affection and service. Whether this being is the original creator of all things or merely the author of our own existence, whether he is infinite or finite, or whether he is a being of simple righteousness or also mercy, this argument cannot assure us. But one thing is, we are very emotional. We get attached to things. In fact, when it comes to our relationship with God, how would you describe our relationship with God? How does it make you feel? Do you serve Him out of fear? Do you serve Him out of love? When we look at ours is a love relationship between us and God. At least it should be, and not a relationship between us and God out of fear of hell. It should be a loving relationship between us and God. But when you look at other societies as well, look at India, for example. Are they emotionally attached to their gods? Absolutely, Brother Peterman. But their emotion isn't love, but it's fear. My one friend, he's from Mumbai, India. It's the old capital. I've heard of Mumbai so often, I don't remember the title. Okay, I'll throw that off the burn. He's from the capital of India, right around that area. Now his name's been changed to Mumbai. But he said that one year, during their festival for the elephant, that all these rats came out and started polluting the city. And what they thought was that with their worship to the elephant god, they angered the rat god. So the following year, Brother Eli, what they did was they worshiped the elephant god during their festivals and everything else. But during the same time, they always carried around a little statue of that rat god, hoping to appease him as well. When you look at idolatry, it's not a religious system of love, but they do it out of fear. And when we look around the world, everyone has emotions. And they are all, and we are all emotionally attached to things and people. And we are emotionally attached to our gods. Therefore, the fact that we are all emotional indicates that it's a universal thing. It's not a secluded or isolated incident. Therefore, someone or something had to create us to be emotional. Therefore, there is someone or something greater than man. We didn't just happen. All these complexities and intricacies are so minute and so detailed, and they work so well together. We could not have just come from nothing. In fact, there's no way, and I don't know where Brother Carter got this, he used this the other year in preaching here, that man could have come to existence from goo to you by way of the zoo. There's no way that could have happened. Or, in the words of Ken Corbett, the rain came down, there were rocks, the rain came down, the rocks turned to a giant soup, and out crawled Grandpa or Grandma. There's no way that could have happened as well. Everything is so complex and works so well together. There's no way for these things to just have happened. Any thoughts, any questions at this point? If not, we'll move on to the next argument, which is the ontological argument. And in this argument is the innate concept of an absolute or perfect being is necessary to man's thinking. Basically stating, okay, we've looked at the argument for design, we've looked at the argument for creation and the cause and effect. We've looked at the makeup of man, but now the more we look at, there had to be someone or something greater. And what this looks at is what we've already discussed a little bit as well. All men have the idea that of a God exists. In fact, there's a long tribe, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was the chief of a tribe down in South America. And they worship all these gods. The sky god, the cloud god, which I'll just throw this out. That's why it's important for us to watch our terminology when we even talk about things, because it's easy for us to joke around and say Mother Nature. Well, Mother Nature's a god. It's a pagan god. But he was looking at the sun, the sky god, and he was looking at the sun god, and he was looking at nature around him, and what he realized was, if the sun god was so supreme, because if you look at a bunch of societies, the sun god is normally the supreme deity. You look at Egypt, Ra, sun god, supreme deity. But as we look at things, he was looking at the sun god, and all of a sudden, some clouds started passing by and covering him up. And he began thinking, if the sun god is so powerful, then how come he can be covered up with a cloud? And he began thinking about this. And the more he thought about this, he said, you know what? We need to worship another God that we don't know of. Because the sun god cannot be the supreme deity, because a cloud can cover him up. Therefore, there had to be a supreme God somewhere greater than the sun god. And they began worshiping this God as well. Do we have a biblical account similar to this? Absolutely. The Apostle Paul is standing on Mars Hill preaching a sermon. And where is he standing? At the altar of the unknown God. The God whom the Romans do not know. And the fact that mankind, regardless of where you go and who you are, the fact that you have the idea that there is a God indicates that there has to be a perfect and absolute being somewhere that is greater than man and greater than the universe. Because you know what? Our minds are so limited. In fact, there are things in this universe we still can't understand fully. But yet, the fact that our minds are limited indicates that there must be an infinite being somewhere that created everything. Because we still do not understand even how all of nature works. And while we look at this argument, it may not necessarily prove that God, as we know him, exists, but it does prove that there is a God or a supreme being somewhere that is greater than man and had to create everything. And that his existence alone, he must be absolute, infinite, and perfect in order to make everything work in such harmony and balance. We'll move on to the Christological argument. And we're slowly gearing from the argument of creation all the way towards a religious argument. And when we look at the Christological argument, it examines all the elements of Christianity and states that they must be accounted for. We can't take an isolated incident like Peter or John on their way to the temple and saying to the layman, in the name of Jesus, rise up and walk. You can't isolate that, because you can try to explain that away. But you have to take everything as a whole, because you cannot prove just one thing. If either Christianity is truth or it's not. And if there's just one aspect of Christianity that is truth, then the whole thing cannot be false. So we must pay attention to it. And when we look at this argument, it basically declares as well there's a reason for everything. And like I said, it's not just taking into consideration one isolated incident, but it's taking into Christianity as a whole. All the prophecies, every verse in the Bible, every phrase in the Bible, the history of the nation of Israel, all the miracles, the supernatural character of Christ. Because when you look at Christ alone, you cannot deny him throughout history, because even secular history records his existence. The most famous one we probably point to would be extracurricular, extra biblical, of course, being outside the Bible, would be Josephus. He is a Jewish scholar and writer at the time, but even other secular writers write about the existence of Christ. The influence of Christianity on the world. And even greater than that, Brother Peterman, I don't know about you, but when I got saved, there was a change. And it wasn't necessarily something I did. I had to work on it, Sister Tina. But there was a change inside and out. And even our moral makeup was changed. It's not just a spiritual thing, but it's just a restoration inside and out, moral and spiritual. So if we're going to deny Christianity, we have to deny every aspect of it and prove it false. And when we look at it, this is impossible. Because there are so many arguments for Christianity, and God, the God of Christianity, He cannot and it cannot be ignored. And when we look at God, He must exist, and He must exist as thought of in Christianity. What do I mean by that? God must exist as the one to whom the Bible records, and He exists as that very individual. Not the one who is homophobic. I'm forgetting all his big words from last week, Richard Dawkins. But regardless, God is love, mercy, peace, judgment, the creator of all things, the Savior of your and my soul. He is all those things, and He is exactly as described as Paul, Peter, James, John. Get into the church founders, Eusebius, Augustine, and even some of the Catholic popes. God is who the Bible declares Him as. There is no denying it. Any thoughts, any questions?
I just wanted to verse in Romans chapter 1 about the existence of God and the verses here. It says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and righteousness of men who hold the truth and unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. For God has shown it as man. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood in the things that are made, even the eternal power of God, so that they will not be excused." And to me, those verses just show that God makes a difference on everything He did,
Oh, yeah.
us, and everything around us.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the arguments. When we look at the first couple of books of Romans, there's the argument against, I'm trying to remember if they have them alliterated, but basically the heathen is what you're looking at there. The existence that God does exist. This is the argument for how He knows that God exists. There's the argument for the Hebrew. I can't remember the third one. But that's exactly right. Creation declares that there is a God. And even the heathen himself knows that, and Romans chapter 1 declares that as well. That God is seen through His creation. Therefore, man is left without any excuse. God has done His best to reveal Himself to mankind. Any other thoughts or questions at this time? If not, let's just bow our heads in prayer and prepare our hearts for service. Gracious Heavenly Father, we give You all praise and glory for everything You've done for us and shall continue to do. And I pray that You be with each one of us, Lord, and make Your word more real to to us than ever before. May it be settled within our minds and our hearts that not only are you the God above all things, but you're the Savior of our soul, Lord, that we give us a greater desire to fall more in love with you than ever before, to have the mind of Christ and the heart of God. I pray in the name of Jesus that all our minds would be brought into captivity, Lord, and that we be in one mindset and one accord, Lord, that we can worship you in sincerity and truth, that the Holy Ghost could move freely as he sows desires, Lord, that our hearts would be plowed and tender, that your word would take root on good soil, Lord, that it would grow in our hearts and our minds, Lord, that it would not just retain in our thoughts, but, Lord, that it would retain in our lives, that it would not be far from us. I pray that you anoint the song leader and the musicians, Lord, give them a special blessing as they praise you and lead us upon the string instruments and the vocal cords, Lord. Pray that you anoint the pastor as he brings forth your word and give him the message you'd have us to hear, Lord. And may, Lord, we fall more in love with you than ever before, because that is your desire. And through that, you will receive the glory and the honor, Lord. May you be pleased with all that is said and done in our lives. We'll give you all praise and glory for it in your name.
Yes.